I want to start today's deep dive by tapping into a feeling that I'm willing to bet every single person listening has felt, even if they've never quite found the words for it.
Hmm.
It isn't that loud, smashing heartbreak of a breakup. It's not the shock of, a sudden betrayal. It's quieter.
So much quieter.
It's the specific nagging sense of wanting something from someone, a connection, a depth, maybe a future that just isn't there.
And the kicker with this feeling is that it's not there because they slammed the door in your face.
No.
It's just absent. It's the silence where you really, really wanted to sound.
Exactly. It's this hovering state of almost but not quite. And today we are diving into a truly beautiful and honestly a bit haunting essay by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha.
Yeah.
It's titled Wanting More Than Was Ever Offered. And I have to say, reading this felt a little dangerous. Like I was being called out for things I felt maybe 10 years ago or maybe even last week.
It is a very confronting piece of writing.
Mm-hmm.
What Malha does here is he strips away all the easy narratives we tell ourselves.
Right.
He isn't interested in he lied to you or she led you on. He's interested in something much more subtle. The emotional architecture of unreciprocated or maybe partially reciprocated desire.
Which is such a key distinction we need to make right away. Because we aren't talking about toxic relationships or gaslighting or abuse here, are we?
No, not at all. And that's why this is so difficult to navigate. If there were manipulation or, grand lies, you'd have a villain. You could get angry.
Yeah, anger is easy.
But Malha is asking us to look at the accumulation of hope in a space where, technically speaking, no promises were ever made. It's all about the gray areas.
That's the mission for this deep dive, then. We need to figure out why we hold on when we aren't being held back. And Malha proposes a central tension right off the bat that I found really sticky. He argues that this wanting isn't a result of deception. It's a result of possibility.
And that one distinction, it changes the entire conversation. We so often want to blame the other person for tricking us, for, selling us a car with no engine. But Malha argues that the fuel for this fire isn't lies. It's the sheer gravity of what could be. It's the potential energy that you, the wanter, are generating yourself.
So let's walk through the timeline of how this actually happens, because it doesn't start with a bang. You don't meet someone and just immediately decide to be heartbroken over them for 6 months.
No, it's a slow creep. It's insidious because it's so quiet. Malha describes the genesis of this wanting as growing imperceptibly. It's fed by what he calls small moments.
The examples he gives are just painfully relatable. A look held a fraction of a second too long.
Oh, yeah.
A message that comes in late at night, an implied understanding. It's the stuff that if you tried to explain it to a jury, you'd sound insane. But, Your Honor, he sent me a song on Spotify.
Right, and the jury would just say, so what? And the danger is that none of those things are explicit promises. A look is physically just a look. A text is just a text. But because they feel special, because they feel intimate in the moment, the wanting starts to build. And it feels reasonable. It feels modest. You're not asking for marriage.
You're just responding to the vibe that's already in the room.
You're just responding to the vibe, yeah.
I love how he phrases that, responding to what is already there. It feels like a natural reaction, not an imposition. You aren't forcing the door open. The door was ajar.
Right. But this brings us to the core mechanical problem Malha identifies. The huge difference between possibility and a promise.
This is where things get really deep.
This is the heavy lifting of the essay. Malha writes that possibility has its own gravity. It pulls feeling toward it without requiring any confirmation.
Oh.
Think about that. Gravity doesn't ask your permission to pull you down. It just does.
It's like being pulled into an orbit, but the planet you're orbiting hasn't actually.
Right, hasn't invited you to land.
Exactly. You're just suspended there.
That's a great way to visualize it. And the source emphasizes that in these situations, there is usually no clear statement of intention. The other person didn't say, I want to build a life with you. But, and this is the hook, they offered suggestion, tone, proximity, and availability.
Availability is a big one. I think we underestimate how intoxicating simple availability is.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they keep showing up can feel like a promise, even when it isn't one.
It invites investment without a formal ask. And that is where the trap is set. You start building this beautiful castle on a foundation of maybe, simply because nobody explicitly told you no.
You mistake the absence of a no for the presence of a yes.
Exactly that.
Eventually, though, the check comes due. You hit the realization phase. And Malha uses a metaphor here that really helped me visualize the pain of this. He talks about the container.
Oh, the container concept is brilliant. He says the realization isn't a sudden break, it's a slow seep.
Yeah.
You eventually realize that what you are carrying has outgrown the container it was placed in.
Which implies the terms of the relationship, the container, they haven't actually changed. The other person is exactly where they always were.
There's still just the chill hangout friend or the occasional date.
They haven't moved, but your internal world has just expanded. You've got a gallon of feelings trying to fit into a pint-sized cup.
And that mismatch is where the pain lives. It's not that the cup shrank, it's that you grew and now you're spilling over.
Okay, this leads us to a part of the essay that I think is going to make some listeners squirm. I know I did. Mala points out that we aren't just innocent victims in this dynamic.
Oh.
We have a certain level of complicity.
Yeah, it's the part that prevents you from playing the victim card fully. Mala points out that this growth, it didn't happen against your will. You were present for it.
You felt it building.
You felt the temperature rising in the room and you didn't leave.
I think we all have that tendency to rewrite history and say, I was blindsided, I didn't know. But Mala says, actually, you probably did. You saw the limits.
He notes that there were likely moments early on where the edges of what was possible were visible. You saw the wall. You saw where the emotional road ended.
But you hope anyway.
You hoped anyway. You saw a stop sign and treated it like a suggestion.
I want to unpack that concept of hope. Because usually in our culture, hope is this beautiful, positive thing on a Hallmark card. Never give up hope. But Malha defines it very differently in this context.
He redefines it entirely for this specific emotional landscape. He says this hope is not naive, it's not optimistic, it's quieter and more stubborn.
Stubborn seems right. It feels almost defiant, like, I know the odds, but watch this.
It lives alongside awareness.
Yeah.
And this is the paradox. You can intellectually know that nothing more is coming. You can look at the facts and say, this person cannot give me what I want.
And yet
you still feel yourself leaning forward emotionally.
it's like your brain and your heart are operating in two different time zones. Your brain is in the harsh reality of today, and your heart is living in some potential future that doesn't exist.
And the mechanics of how we keep that hope alive are, well, they're fascinating. Malha talks about how the wanting feeds itself on interpretation. This is where our brains get really creative.
Oh, the interpretation game. If they don't text back, you don't think they aren't interested. You think maybe they're busy or maybe they're overwhelmed.
Maybe they lost their phone in a river.
Right. Or if they're just neutral, you read into it. You treat a generic hey like it's a sonnet just to keep the possibility alive.
You are doing the work for them. You are filling in the gaps with your own desire. Because the alternative, accepting the silence as an answer, is just too painful.
It's exhausting, though, being the screenwriter, director, and audience for a movie that the other person is barely an extra in.
That's a brutal way to put it, but yeah, it's accurate.
I want to pivot to what might be the most frustrating part of these situations, and a key part of Mala's argument,
Okay.
the absence of a villain. Because, look, if someone hurts you, you want them to be the bad guy.
This is crucial. If the other person was a monster, it would be easy. If they were cruel or they lied or cheated, you could get angry. Anger is a great fuel for moving on.
It really is.
It propels you out of the situation like a rocket.
But here, Maha insists there is often no wrongdoing, which feels impossible to accept when you're the one hurting. You want to scream, you did this to me.
But often, the other person is acting with care. They might be warm. They might genuinely enjoy the connection. Malha points out they might be completely consistent within the limits they set.
So they said they wanted casual, and they acted casual.
They said they weren't ready, and they acted not ready. They aren't breaking any rules.
They're just not playing the same game you are.
The pain doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from a mismatch of depth and capacity. You are operating at 100% intensity, and they are happy at 40.
And 40% isn't zero?
No, it's not zero. And that's the problem. It's not enough for you.
That creates such a confusing internal state. Mala describes it as a logic problem. Why does the wanting not stop when the facts are already clear?
I think I've asked myself that question at 3 a.m. more times than I care to admit. It's the central question. If I know they can't give me this, why do I still want it? And Mala's answer is that wanting is shaped by attachment, memory, and imagination. And none of those things operate by logic.
It's not a spreadsheet. You can't just delete the row because the ROI is bad.
Exactly. Once a feeling has been activated, it doesn't just withdraw because the return on investment is low.
Yeah.
It lingers. It looks for somewhere to go. It's energy.
So what happens to that energy if it can't go to the other person and it doesn't just vanish? Where does it go? Mala introduces this concept of compression.
This is the adaptation phase, and it's painful to visualize. The person wanting more begins to adapt around the limitation. You don't leave, but you don't keep asking for more.
You lower your expectations. You settle.
But it's more active than settling. Mala calls it self-editing. You start trimming your emotional edges to fit into the available space. You learn to hold enjoyment and disappointment at the same time.
That image of trimming emotional edges is brutal. It's like you're cutting off parts of your own personality or your own needs just to fit into this tiny box they've offered you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm too intense. Okay, I'll just cut that part off.
And that creates an immense internal strain. Malha writes that the feeling presses inward, becoming quieter, denser, harder to articulate. You stop talking about it. You stop admitting it, even to yourself sometimes.
You become the cool girl or the chill guy. You pretend you're fine with the casual setup while inside you're screaming. You're performing indifference while feeling obsession.
Precisely. And the connection continues. Outwardly, it's unchanged. But internally, the distance between what you feel and what you receive just gets wider and wider. The compression builds pressure.
But why stay? I mean, this is the million-dollar question. If it hurts this much to compress yourself, if you're slowly crushing your own spirit, why not just walk away?
Mala touches on something here that I hadn't really thought about before. Loyalty. But not loyalty to the person.
Not to the person.
No. This was the most profound psychological point for me. He talks about a quiet loyalty to the feeling itself.
Loyalty to the feeling. Break that down for me. What does that actually mean?
It means that letting go feels like erasing a part of your own history. It's a loyalty to the version of you that saw the possibility.
Oh, wow.
If you walk away, you have to admit that your investment was misplaced. You have to admit that the magic you felt wasn't real, or at least it wasn't shared.
It's like protecting your own intuition. You don't want to admit you were wrong about the potential. You don't want to look back and say, I made all that up.
And there's fear there, too. Malhan notes a fear that if you stop wanting here, the feeling is nowhere else to go. Or worse, that your capacity to want this deeply is fragile.
Right. If you shut this down, will you ever feel this way again?
Will you? And so you protect the wanting, because it makes you feel alive, even if it hurts. It's better to feel a painful longing than to feel nothing at all.
Yes. It becomes about protecting the part of you that still reaches, even when the reach isn't met.
It's an act of self-preservation, oddly enough.
So eventually, though, we have to talk about the end, or the lack of an end, because we live in a world that loves closure. We love a good breakup speech, a dramatic exit, burning the photos.
Yeah, but Malha says that's a myth in this scenario. He really dismantles the idea of the aha moment.
I knew it.
We tend to think that once we see the situation clearly, once we realize, oh, they are never going to love me the way I want, that we will naturally change, that we'll just pack our bags and leave.
But clarity doesn't equal change. I think that's the hardest lesson of adulthood. Knowing the stove is hot doesn't always stop you from touching it.
No. You can see the shape of the situation with perfect 20/20 vision and still remain inside it. You can know it's a dead end and still keep driving the car. Knowledge isn't always power in the emotional realm.
And he also warns against trying to turn this into a lesson, which I am definitely guilty of. I'm learning so much about boundaries. This is teaching me resilience.
We all are. We treat our pain like it's a seminar we paid for.
We do. We try to frame the pain as growth, to make it useful, to give it purpose.
But Mala says resisting that narrative is important. He argues that this wanting doesn't exist to teach you something. It exists simply because you are human.
Humans attach, humans imagine, humans hope beyond what is available. It's not a flaw.
It's a feature. And because of that, there is often no clean ending. It doesn't resolve into wisdom. It doesn't resolve into neat acceptance. It remains.
It becomes a trace, a background presence, like a scar that doesn't hurt anymore but is still there on your skin.
A familiar ache that you learn to carry. Mala suggests that you don't necessarily get over it in the traditional sense. You just learn to carry it without constantly reacting to it.
You stop checking your phone.
But you remember the feeling of checking it.
That feels incredibly validating, actually. To know that if you're still thinking about that person months or years later, it's not because you're broken or obsessive, it's just the nature of this specific kind of ghost.
It haunts quietly. It is. It's a condition of emotional life. It's the price of admission for having an imagination and a heart.
So if we look at the big picture here, what is the takeaway? I mean, we've got this quiet wanting, this compression of self, this lack of closure. It sounds bleak, but somehow reading the essay, it felt peaceful.
It feels peaceful because it's true. And truth usually brings a kind of peace, even if it's a sad kind of peace. Mala's conclusion is that this experience is less about the specific relationship and more about the human capacity for desire itself. It shows us that desire doesn't require permission. Attachment persists without promises.
We can love people who don't love us back in the same way. And that doesn't make us fools. It just makes us human.
Exactly. It means our internal world is rich enough to sustain a feeling all on its own.
There's no final judgment to be made, no scorecard.
The experience just sits quietly alongside everything else in your life, unresolved, aware of its limits, but still somehow alive.
It's just there, a part of the furniture of your soul. You don't have to sit on it, but you don't have to throw it out either.
Beautifully put.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Pedro Malha's work, I want to leave the listener with a thought to mull over. We spend so much energy trying to fix our feelings or solve our relationships like they're puzzles, but Malha's essay suggests that some tensions aren't meant to be solved, they're just meant to be carried. So here is the question. If clarity doesn't cure the wanting, and if the other person isn't a villain, what would it look like to simply make peace with the tension itself? To stop fighting the wanting and just let it sit there, quiet and unresolved, without letting it drive the car.
That is the real work. Learning to sit with the incomplete.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complex world of wanting. We'll catch you on the next one.